All right, everyone. Welcome back to Milsurp World. I'm your host, Aaron. With me today, I have Andrew, Danny, and Will. Say hi, everybody.
Oh,
Hey,
oh,
Today's topic, I tasked these three gentlemen with coming up with a rifle model that they think is overrated and a rifle model they think is underrated. And we're going to discuss each one. But first, before we get going into the topic today, I wanted to make a correction. In the previous podcast, I talked about pressure testing done in France, referring to Spanish Mausers and people thinking that they're extremely unsafe using them with 7.62 NATO. I need to correct myself. I spoke to a friend of mine in France, and the way they do their proof testing is the rifle is proofed once, and that's all it needs to be proofed for, unless you make a modification to the barrel, the receiver, or change the headspace. Like if you switch out to a different bolt, you have to have it reproofed. And they do not proof at 200%, they proof at 120% of nominal. So I wanted to make that clear to everybody. I got that wrong. Moving on, I think we're going to start today's podcast with a quick introduction to Andrew and Will as they are new. Danny was in the last one, so he doesn't get to talk. Let's start with Will. Can you give us a background of why you started collecting Milsurps real quick and what your collection focuses on?
yeah, sure. I've been collecting, I guess, about 6 years now, pretty heavy. And I guess I grew up going to gun shows, and I used to see old military rifles that I didn't know what they were, and I wanted to try and learn about them. So eventually, when I was in high school, I just went to a gun show and bought myself a Spanish Mauser and didn't even know what it was and took it home and figured it out. And ever since then, I just love collecting Milsurp rifles, and that's really my focus is just Milsurp rifles.
All right. Andrew?
well, I've been collecting military surplus rifles for about 5 years now. I kind of got started into it. I was kind of forced into it by a buddy of mine. We were over at Gander Mountain up near me, and they had a couple of Mauser 9130s on the rack for sale. Told me, get one now. They're so cool. And I broke down and bought it. And before you know it, I found out that this hobby, though it can be very expensive, it can also be a lot of fun, especially when you start getting into the nitty gritty of markings and things like that and all whatever. So I just started grabbing guns and collecting them, and my focus is mostly on Japanese firearms right now, but I'll collect just about anything. Love the history and holding that history in your hands and wondering where it's been and what it's seen. And
I think we've all been there. Will, would you say, I know you say you collect everything. You kind of have a focus on French firearms, right?
Yeah, I mean, I collect pretty much every country as long as it's a bolt action Milsurp rifle, but I'd say like the crown jewel, the biggest part of my collection would be French rifles.
Okay.
And that would be the overwhelming majority of my knowledge base, I guess you'd say.
We make fun of Will a lot because he loves his frogs.
That's right.
So we're gonna go to the topic at hand today, are overrated milsurps and underrated milsurps. Now I didn't specify rifles; they all just picked rifles. Could have done some handguns, but I really think there's probably only one handgun we could all agree on that's overrated. The Luger, right?
uh,
No, okay.
no comment.
Well, all right. No comments on that. Will, I have picked you to go first. What is your underrated milsurp?
Underrated, we talked about the French influence. The rifle I chose would be the Uruguayan 1871/94 Davidas conversion of their Mauser rifles.
A nice, common, easy one.
That's right. I tried to pick one that has a lot of history, a lot of different countries' influence, but usually not one the average person, like the entry level collectors, had experience with. So
I've never even actually seen.
yeah, I mean, I have both the rifle and the carbine, which are a little bit tougher than the rifle. But other than those two, the first one I've ever seen in person was at the last gun show, and of course the guy had no idea what it was.
So what makes you think that underrated? What features or things about it do you think is rated about? Because it's unknown.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to your Siamese Mausers in that they're underrated just because they're so unknown. They're undervalued by the average collector. I mean, they do have some good military potential. I mean, they're still conversions of Mauser 71 infantry single shot black powder rifles. They're updated to the 6.5 Dotato cartridge, which is a good cartridge, but you're still stuck with a single shot bolt action rifle in the 1890s. But I don't know, they're really interesting to me. They have the original German influence because they're all made originally in Germany, and then they were issued to Uruguay. And then the long story is the man named De Vitus took all their rifles back to France and essentially updated them to the 6.5 Dotato, which was a rifle that France was trying but never was formally adopted. Was the 1895 Dotato rifle. I love the French influence. They look, the lines and the sights and everything about them is so French. They look similar to a Lebel. They look similar to a Berthier. They have clearing rods. I just think they're a big conglomerate of world rifle history that most people don't even know about.
I think it's fair enough. Andrew, Danny, do you have any input on that?
You know, I've seen one of those in person, and it was a pretty slick looking gun. It was pristine shape. I don't know if most of them are, but the one I saw was pristine and beautiful. And you know, I honestly wouldn't mind owning one. I thought pretty long and hard about buying the one that I found. So
I have only seen pictures. I cannot speak to actually holding one or seeing one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand your thought, Will, about the it's still a single shot rifle in the 1890s, but I'm pretty sure there was a fair amount of countries that were still using like rolling blocks that had updated them into like a smokeless cartridge at the time, so it's not uncommon.
Right.
And I would
Do you think
argue
that
that it might be even better than a rolling block because at least it is a bolt action.
And I mean, I've never gotten to shoot mine because the 6.5 Dotato cartridge is practically impossible to get your hands on other than custom hand loading. But I would have to think as a smokeless and 6.5 cartridge, it would probably be a pretty sweet shooter.
Anybody have anything else on this?
I was just going to add on to that to say that in the 1890s, the United States using the trapdoor Springfield as not necessarily front line, but they were being carried in the Spanish-American War. We were behind. Even the Krag, when we adopted it, still behind. So seeing a single shot bolt action.
Yeah, I mean, I would take the Dividus and the 6.5 Dotato all day long over the trapdoor Springfield.
I agree.
the Swedes used the rolling block, well into the 1890s. So I guess it was a little bit more common than probably most people know.
Yeah, it's you got to think a lot of these smaller countries, especially the United States being an exception because we were behind on the times, but a lot of the smaller countries too. You got to imagine don't have a lot of income, don't have a lot of time or money to spend on developing all this stuff. So take what we have.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because when they got the rifles back to Uruguay, they didn't sit well. They didn't like them, and a year later they adopted the 1895 Mauser, and they surplused all of the 94 conversions. So they didn't ever really see any real service or anything.
Might explain why they're in somewhat good shape most of the time.
Oh yeah.
All right, Will. Let's get into the fun stuff. What do you think is overrated?
All right, so I guess everyone has an opinion about everyone in the U.S. collector market has an opinion about the Mosin Nagant and the quality and whatnot, but everyone tends to believe that the finished Mosins are an exception to that, and they think every finished Mosin is so much greater than your standard Soviet or Russian Mosin, and they're good shooters and whatnot. But I tend to disagree. I mean, I own pretty much every version of the Mosin that's readily available to collect, and I own all the finished Mosin variants, and I just don't believe they're actually that much better than the counterparts. I mean, I've shot most of my finished Mosins and they still have sticky bolt problems. I've shot finished Mosins of mine where the extractors have exploded and just so many problems that, I mean, I see it across the board with Mosin and Gants, but I don't see the Cadillac fit and finish on the finished Mosins that everyone hypes about. I mean, I know they look good and everything, but they still have problems.
I would agree. I've never held one myself, but I've seen a lot of different people talking about this. I think Danny, you had a little bit of a disappointment, didn't you?
Yeah. I made a video. It was actually my first time ever shooting a finished Mosin. It was an M39, and I was thoroughly disappointed in its performance. It had a very sticky bolt. It was I was expecting something far better than the Russian Mosins that I've shot before, and it was kind of on par with the Russian Mosins. It wasn't
right. I mean, they look better. The stocks are better, the bluing's better, but I still have the same extraction issues with every finished Mosin I've shot. And I mean, I got the 91, 91, 30, 24, 27, 28, 30, 39. I mean, I got them all. And I've had the same problem shooting multiples of them.
Flapping the bolt open, is that what you're saying?
Yep, same exact issue.
I mean, it is the exact same design. It's not like they changed anything really radically.
Right. They're the same receivers. They're the same
The
bolts.
bolts interchangeable through all like Finnish Mosins and Russian Mosins.
Yeah, I mean, other than headspace, they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I've run across that problem with every finished Mosin I've ever shot.
Now, I wonder, Danny, do you think you were maybe more disappointed because it had been hyped to the degree that it had been?
Yeah, probably. Like if it was just like if I just assumed that this was just a regular run of the mill Mosin, like if it wasn't finished and it was Russian, I would have just been like, yep, it's a Mosin. This is how it runs. Maybe
Right.
I was just disappointed.
That's how I feel.
Andrew, any thoughts?
I have owned 3 Finnish Mosinagants in my collecting experience. Own one. It is a Model 91. I believe it's a Westinghouse that was converted by the Finns. It performs no better. Model 9130 that I bought all those years ago. To be honest, they might be better accuracy wise. I have never taken mine out to a long distance range. It seems to hold its own with the other Milsurps as far as accuracy is concerned. In my experience, I just haven't seen a performance increase or a more noticeable increase in performance from a finned rifle than a regular Mosin.
I have a thought, guys. I'm just spitballing here. I have a thought. I have an idea here. The majority of the rifles that you find M9130s are going to be Soviet reworks from the late 40s, early 50s. And we know they didn't really give a crap about reworking them. That was just fake work projects. I'm wondering if the reputation became more noticeable because the Finnish ones are not reworked that way. They typically to be in better condition. They typically are not reworked by a person that doesn't know what they're doing. You understand what I'm saying? It's just a theory. I don't have any proof to this.
What you're saying is shellac is not the correct finish then.
No, it isn't. But that's another topic for a different day. I don't want to get started on that. That's a 20-minute rant that you are not going to bait me into. I am not doing that today. I've had this discussion with Danny before, and it got me off on a 20-minute rant. Very angry by the end of it. We're not doing that.
I'm pretty sure that this made you like. How many hours did you spend in reading like Soviet era like trade treaties for shellac?
I didn't spend a lot of time, but what Danny's referring to, I did discover a trade agreement. India, the independent Republic of India. I don't know if it's republic, but whatever. The independent India and the Soviet Union, where it mentioned shellac. And I won't go into it any further because if I do, he's gonna get me going on a rant here. I'm not gonna do that.
Another time.
Yeah, that's gonna come into our myths and fun facts episode later on. That'll be a fun one because that'll be a lot of people angry about that one. All right, back to the Finnish Mosin. I was just trying to come up with an idea of why they get this reputation. There has to come from somewhere. It has to be some noticeable, that's the only thing I can think of is that maybe the fit and finish on these is a little bit better than the standard one that people run across, and so they just assumed that it was a better rifle.
I have sort of 2 ideas. Like the first one being kind of like what Will said, where they just they improved the overall like gun. They didn't improve the action, but they improved like the accuracy, and they gave them barrels and like better stocks and better like barrel harmonics and stuff like that. They probably are much more accurate, and they get like a better reputation that way. And that probably accounts for some of it. And the second thing, like the second idea, is just like of the least good Milsurps probably of the era of like World War I, World War II, and pretty much any improvement to that is just going to be.
So I think, are we all in agreement here that we don't think the Finnish? Are we thinking the Finnish ones are even a little bit better, or are we thinking them basically the same?
I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit better, but it's not the hype that most people think. That most people think it seems like you read a Finn Mosin and people are comparing it to like a German Mauser. And I mean, it doesn't matter what you do to the Mosin action, it's just not going to get up there the way people hype it up to be, in my opinion.
I think if a rifle was given like an overall score, that's a total of its parts. Like they improved, like the stock and the finish and stuff like that, but they didn't improve the action. So,
right,
like the overall score of the rifle goes up because of all the other improvements, but they didn't, they didn't like really improve the heart of the whole rifle.
They didn't bring it like into a next level category. They just made it the best of what it could be. But its potential is still lower than the industry standard for all the other rifles. It's the best of the worst.
That's the best way to put it, I suppose. All right, moving on. Andrew, what do you think of your underrated?
Underrated rifle, without question, by far, would be the Japanese Arisaka model Type 99.
Yeah.
Or the Type 38.
Because they blow up, right?
Here we go. Let me put it to you this way. This is something that I have encountered a lot in my experience. I have heard these rifles be called tomato sticks. These rifles, as the stories told, these legends of lore, that these rifles are renowned for simply blowing up. You just put a round in them and they blow up. I've heard that the quality control was so bad at the factories that they made them on purpose to blow up. I have heard stories that the little yellow men in Japan couldn't make anything worth a darn, and that everything they made was poor quality, and that everything that they made was made with the mindset of, oh, they're all going to die anyway, so why bother making a quality rifle when they're not going to last more than 10 minutes in combat. I have 13 examples here that prove that all of that is completely false. I believe that a lot of the stories that surround the Japanese firearms, the stigma by returning GIs that did not understand how these things were built. I think they understand the history. They didn't understand the history behind the rifles as they were made. 38s that preceded the Type 99s, without question in my mind, and I'm talking comparison to the best there, they are some of the most well balanced and most pleasant to shoot rifles that are available. The Type 99, a slightly larger round than even your 30 caliber, so it's a 7.7 by 50 Japanese. Caliber measures out to 7.62 millimeter. I'll have to recheck that. I have fired my Type 99, at least one of them. It lets you know it's there, but it's by all means very manageable. The sights are absolutely wonderful, especially on the Type 99. They have a peep sight, if you will, kind of set up, but for purposes, they aren't a fine sight. They're accurate. They're easy to acquire. The fit and finish problems that you do on an Nagant. These rifles, I've never had a problem with extraction, cold or hot. They work. They just flat out work. The Type 38s are the same way. Even with the last ditch rifles, like that term, I would prefer the term late war. It's not really coming to mind right now. Substitute standard, that's the term I would like to use. The common misnomer with those is that the metallurgy, the barrels and the rifling and all that, and that was of poorer quality than the early war material, and that has also been proven to be false. Substitute standard late war rifle is just as good. It is just as safe to shoot regular early war Type 99. The reason why I really discredit those rifles is because of their fit and finish. Yes, their fit is terrible. Yes, their finish is bad. You look at two of my Type 99s, and the sights aren't even on the top of the barrel. They're off to the side by almost 5 degrees. You got to hold the thing funky just to aim it. Fit and finish isn't great at the end of the war. Quality, as far as being able to shoot the weapon repeatedly and put rounds down on the target, I would trust my life with an Arisaka. Any model, But yes, these rifles need to rise above the stigma that is given to them. I think the stigma is wearing off, and people are starting to see the value in these rifles, and that they truly are among the best ever made. And I would definitely put a Type 38 in the same category as a Swiss rifle, as a Model 98 Mauser. I would put a Type 38 right up there with them. Absolutely.
Right. I think Andrew has found his calling, Japanese rifles.
I haven't heard the tomato stick one before. I don't even
I've
understand that.
I've heard that. So what that is referring to is that you would basically stick the guns in the ground and use them to grow tomatoes off of because they need a vine to grow on.
Yes, and it has been done.
Yeah, they're essentially what they're saying is they're no better than a piece of wood. Essentially.
Exactly.
Now, I'm sure most of the people listening have heard the rumors associated with Japanese rifles. For the most part, Andrew, I believe most of the exploding quote unquote rumors have coming from people training rifles, correct?
It's correct. Yes.
So for most people that don't know, Japan had a very, very strict system in which that previously used rifles and sometimes new manufacture, I believe as well, were not created for war. They were created for training. So they send them to schools and they would be trained in the use of the weapon. They would be drilled. They would clean it. It would need to be a functional weapon, but they didn't want to bother giving them a barreled rifle because that's a waste of a time. They're not going to be firing them. So they would give them a blank barrel, basically a piece of metal that resembled and had the same amount of weight, and then they would use those and fire blanks out of for training purposes. Now, if you take something that's not meant to be fired in a live cartridge, put a live cartridge in it because it will chamber it, shoot it, that's going to cause a problem.
Yes. To your face, especially.
Yes.
When you have two belligerents in a fight, they're going to find any means necessary in order to give your soldiers the psychological advantage.
Fair
Belittle
enough.
the men, they're going to belittle the equipment.
And that stigma
Exactly.
has continued.
It has it, and it not only that, and this isn't just with Japanese arms. This is prevalent with French firearms. No, will agree with me on that. Italian firearms. Let's just keep the list going. Enemy
It's
belligerents get their stuff laughed at. They just do.
and
Is
some,
that so many foreign countries they invented, still used around the world today, but we don't give them any credit.
no, I understand. And I wanted to make a comment real quick. We I think this is something that also gets brought up a lot. The United States actually captured a bunch of Type 99s and Type 38s, and they did strength testing on them after the war, correct? And that discovered that they were actually much more capable of handling higher pressure cartridges than even what the United States was using.
Is correct. The Type 99 was using high power cartridges for the test north of 90,000 psi. The O3 Springfield, the K98 Mauser, that are legendary and they are wonderful weapons, they were rupturing at 70, 80,000 psi, according to the report that was issued. When they got above 90,000 psi, they literally just stopped. They said, okay, we get it. This thing's not going to break. They tried, I believe, something with the bolt got sheared off, is repairable, and the report said that if they had repaired the bolt, that gun could have kept going.
Danny, Will, what are your thoughts on the Type 99s and Type 38s? I've never had one personally. My Siamese Mausers were made by the same company and the same arsenal, so I know they're high quality, but I've never had a Type 99 or Type 38.
Yeah, I've owned a few Arasakas before, and they're pretty. They're nice. They're very strong. Like one of my Arasakas is it was converted to 7.62 by 39 by the Chinese after the war, and it's a nice shooter. I mean, it's based on the Mauser, the Mauser action, so it's just works. It's just good gun.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with what Andrew said. I do like the Arasaka design, and I've had several Arasakas and still do. And I think most of my collection is geared towards the earlier. I've had the Type 30 and been looking for it a long time for the Type 35, and I have several Type 38s. And I have the Type 1 Paratrooper, and I've had Type 99s, but I mean, they're a good design. I mean, I really consider them a simplified Mauser. There's a lot of features of the Type 99 that I really like. I like the aperture sights that Andrew talked about. I think the Type 99 sights are one of my favorite of all World War One, World War II rifles. You just look down them and they're perfect for me. They had some unusual features like the monopod and the anti-aircraft leading sights that I guess weren't entirely necessary, but I love the evolution of the Arasaka family, and I agree with Andrew. There's a lot of old stereotypes that are just ludicrous.
Let's move on then. Overrated.
We're going to go back to the Mauser Nagant, but I'm going to address a different model. Will touched on the Finnish Nagants. Call out the Model 9130 in particular. This is not to diss the rifle. I still have mine. I still shoot them. Believe the thing to live by here, the thing to understand is things popular doesn't make it better. The Model 9130 is an extremely popular rifle. Back in my day, you could still find them for $120, if not less than that. And some people, you couldn't give them away. And so you have this mantra going on of this Milsurp is so popular because it's cheap and you can get it for a song. It's so accessorizable. I can JB weld anything to it. I can put overpowered crap through it. I can do this, that, and the other to it. Therefore, because of its accessibility, makes it a highly rated, highly respected, whatever, high valued rifle. Basic Mauser 9130 and compare it apples to oranges with any other military surplus rifle. 9130 is a total dingus compared. It's a combination of what Will said earlier. It's a combination of the best of the worst. All the ideas that pretty much were tossed aside by other military rifle designs were incorporated into the Nagant. A rifle that is indestructible, its function is terrible, its accuracy is so-so. As far as taking it into combat is concerned, it's not great. It's not great. I don't want a rifle that, when it warms up, starts having bolt problems after the 5th round. Mine, constantly. I have to wait for it to cool before I can shoot 5 rounds out of it again. I think that is a testament to bad design. Love the thing because it's so popular and still relatively cheap, and you can get one, cut the end of the barrel off to suit your needs, throw it in the back of your truck, and go I don't know, duck hunting, I guess.
I don't know about that. It'd have to be pretty accurate to be a duck hunting gun, and I don't think that's what you use the Mosin for.
Popularity does not mean it's better.
I agree with you.
Overrated Milsurp is the 9130.
I agree with you. I think Danny had this mentioned last time in our podcast where, for some reason, because it's so simply made, so roughly made, that some people think that makes it a feature, that makes it better. Right, Danny?
Yeah, a lot of people think the roughness of it is a feature where it's just like a coincidence of being a early unrefined design. Yeah.
Now, I am a bit of an apologist. I will say that I did sell my 9130. Let me get that right out the way. I didn't like it. I've had to hit it on a table before to bolt open, pain in the ass. However, I'm a bit of an apologist where I will say, and I'll give the benefit of the doubt, that we're talking about a design that came out in 1891 that showed very little improvement. Between 1891 and 1930, when most of them were doing the updates are not to the action. The length of the barrel, the length of the stock, some of where the sling points attach, not to fix the action. Dealing with essentially an action that was designed in 1891, which is it might as well be talking about a biplane to an F-16. It's a totally different time period between 1930 and 1891. You guys agree?
I never thought about it before. Yeah, it's like comparing a biplane to like a Mustang, World War II jet.
It's a time. The what they should have done, and what obviously they didn't do because Soviet Russia was basically crap, obviously at this time, is that they should have taken the rifle and just scrapped it and gone for some new design. But they didn't have the ability to do that. So they did a sensible thing, which is brought up by Othias at the CN Arsenal on YouTube, which I really recommend anybody checking that out. Specifically, um, this model's episode. They said, "Okay, is this good enough? Yes, it's good enough. Let's keep making this, and we'll make better tanks, make better artillery, make better planes, that kind of thing. We're not going to focus on fixing the infantry fire rifle because it's not really that big of a deal. We're going to fix it and make it 20% better. Yeah, whatever. Make a better tank." That's I think the argument for the Mosin, and I'm not going to give it an apologies otherwise because it's still a not very refined, not very good rifle, and that's just the way it ended up.
The only truly modern, up-to-date rifle by the time World War II began was the M1 Garand. If the M1 Garand had not been fielded, it would be, think about it, everybody was fielding a bolt-action rifle.
But I would argue that even though even we'll go into the famous German K98K. The Gewehr 98 came out in 1898, changing basically everything else around it. The time period between 1891 and 1898, you have a massive leap in technology for firearms development, and the time period between 1898 and 1930 have massive leap. The World War One showed what worked and what didn't work, and the Mosin didn't update, didn't change. And that has mostly to do with political issues, the turmoil, the revolution, and the fact that they just didn't have the skilled workforce. That's mostly to do with that. But the fact of the matter is, for the most part, have an unupdated gun in World War II from essentially 1891. Well, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And the thing is, it doesn't even stop at World War II. You see in the 50s, all the satellite Soviet states producing their own variants of the Mosin, with Romania and Hungary and Poland and China all producing the Type 53 and Model 44 carbine. But you also see the 9130. The 9130 is still produced by Romania and Hungary in the 50s. And then you see the 9130 produced by Albania all the way up until the late 1960s. So, I mean, you're all the way at like 1966 through 1968, and we're still producing new 9130s, which are pretty much the exact same as what came out in 1891.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thought that like countries are producing like 1891 era bolt action rifles while countries right next to them are producing AK-47s.
Yep.
That's just the way history works, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my apologies to those and fanboys. I know you're probably not going to be super happy about this. The gun just didn't get updates that it needed, and it probably should have been retired by, I would say, by the end of World War One. But due to the political and economic situation of the empire of Russia, well, the Imperial Russia, and then Soviet Union, just didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a collectible rifle and a good part of history and military history. It's just, it doesn't have from a rifle perspective, it just doesn't, it's not on the same page as a lot of other opportunities that are out there. And it's still really collectible. I mean, I own lots and lots of Mosins, and it's one of my favorite things to collect. But
I think if I remember correctly, add up all the variants, second most mass-produced firearm of all.
yeah, behind the AK.
So it's a common enough gun that, like Andrew said, it's so common most people start out with it. Like Andrew.
Yeah.
And I had
Not
one as well. I sold mine, but I had one.
Yeah, the Soviet 9130 was my first Mosin. I guess now I'm really looking for the really difficult ones like the Romanian and Hungarian 9130s. But I'm also looking for the French 91 still, but hopefully I'll get one soon.
All right. Danny,
Oh,
you are up, sir. What
All
is
right.
your under?
okay. Underrated Milsurp rifle is the 1895, or specifically the Chilean 1895.
Kind of cut off there. The Chilean 1895 Mauser, correct?
Yeah, the underrated Chilean 1895 Mauser.
What makes it underrated?
I think just intrinsic in the value of the gun, like how much they go for. If people sort of appreciated them, the price would just be higher, and it's not. They're still pretty affordable rifles. And the reason why I think it's underrated feature wise is It's a very smooth rifle. Of course, it's a very like highly evolved Mauser action. It was one step right before the 1898 pre 1898. It's a cock on close gun. So a lot of people I know are fans of cock on close actions. They can be faster, I guess, for some people, and it's a cock on close gun, so it's going to be faster for some people. It still has the staggered 5 round box magazine, a little like third lug sort of safety lug for it. There's a lot of variants of the 1895 if you like collecting all the variants of a series, and they made the carbine and a short rifle and then a long rifle, which is the most common. But they're very very well made guns. They were made in Germany by two different firms, and the gun it's harder to get a higher quality functioning Mauser rifle for less money by Chilean.
I would agree. My first rifle was an 1895 Chilean, as we mentioned last episode. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah, it's
we
kind of me thinking about that. Yeah,
we talked about it last episode. Couldn't really come up with a better example, but we can talk about this with Andrew and Will. But Danny and I basically said that 1895 Chilean is basically the pinnacle of the Mauser small ring action, and
Absolutely.
and everything that came after that is going to be large ring. There's some minor exceptions as we talked about, but the 1895 is the pinnacle of the small ring.
yeah. The 18 like the improvements that show in the German 1898 series they're pretty small. Like they're not any real like major improvements. There's just a few changes, mostly for safety. It is. It's a really nice one, and like it's the last of the cock on close Mausers before they switched to the cock on open design. So if whether you're a cock on close versus cock on open, it might be the perfect kind of Mauser for you if you prefer cock on close. So like if you're an infield fan and maybe you really like cock and close guns, that, and it's a great gun too, personally, for me to like if infield people or infield fans are sort of talking up the infields and saying like, oh, it's a cock on close, it's so much faster than the Mauser, and I'm like, well, hi, what about the Swede Mausers? They're all cock and close too.
Yeah, I got a few things to add. I really like the 1895 Chileans as well. I've got a really nice long rifle. Been looking for some of the short rifles and the carbines for a while, but there's a few things about it that are pretty interesting. I guess one is in the U.S., it's the earliest Mauser you can get your hands on that's readily available in mint condition. There's no other Mausers out there that are that early, that are so plentiful in the U.S. market in fantastic condition. Another thing is the overwhelming majority of them are all antiques. The overwhelming majority are Ludwig Lowe manufacturers, and that might make a difference for some people depending on where they are and their state requirements for firearms versus antiques. And there's a lot to collect there, and you can get a DWM manufactured one, a Lowe manufactured one, and they also made them in Austria-Hungary at Steyr. It's a uncommon variant, but they're out there. But
Yeah,
I
I
really
have
like
seen that one. Will I have seen a Steyr manufactured receiver.
the 1895s are, I think they're a great variant. It's a good starting point for anyone who's trying to get into Central or South American contract Mausers.
Yeah, those are good points. Yeah, the possibility of it being antique, which is even if it doesn't necessarily matter like legally for like where you live, like it's just super cool. It's a super cool feeling to get a gun like delivered straight to your doorstep. Nice. And then also the caliber. I forgot to mention the caliber. 7mm Mauser. It is a fantastic cartridge. It's fairly low recoiling. It's got plenty of power. Nice stopping power.
Well, I would even argue that an example of why it's such a good cartridge is that obviously the one that Will brought up, the diabetes rifle, is the cartridge doesn't exist. It's non-existent. Very obscure and just as he said, hand loading. And the Type 99s that Andrew brought up, 7.7 is not very common. It's still somewhat available, but not super common. 7mm Mauser, extremely readily available. They still make firearms chambered in it for hunting.
That's
Yeah, I
true.
think
Yeah, they sell 7mm Mauser in like Cabela's and stuff. Yeah.
that's a big advantage for the Chilean Mauser right there.
And I would people that have told me before like you should modern loads in this. I've heard Similar stuff to the Type 99. The metal quality is poor. They didn't use right kind of heat treatment, and that's just BS. They're very well made. These are high quality firearms because Mauser was trying to sell his guns to many people as he can. He was not going to make substandard products.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything out there that's of better quality than a Ludwig Low manufactured Chilean Mauser. I mean, yeah, you have some potential in the 1960s when Chile started converting their Mausers to 7.62 NATO. They did go back and update some of their 1895s to 7.62 NATO, and you could have a debate about whether or not those are safe. But
I don't
as
think we need to
rifles came
debate
out of
that.
Germany,
Those are pretty unsafe in most people's eyes.
well, yeah, I agree, but I don't think anyone can really have a discussion about the rifles as they left Germany.
Anybody have anything else on 1895s? I love mine personally.
You know what? I'd like to get one that's rechambered in 7.62 and test it, shooting it in high pressure, like 308 loads, and see what happens.
I can take a guess. You're going to
Yeah,
rupture the chamber.
I think most people believe the 1912 Chilean Mausers converted to 7.62 NATO seem to be okay, but the 1895s are generally regarded as not.
Now, to go into detail just a little bit real quick about that, the big reason 1912s are considered safe for the most part are the fact that they rebarreled the Mausers. They rebarreled them. The 1895s, they did not rebarrel. They reamed out the chamber. A ream, I don't know how to even describe how they did. It looks ridiculous. Made it oversized, then put an insert into the chamber and soldered that in place. Now, if to most people that have any idea what about how firearms work, that sounds insane.
Yeah.
But that's what they did, and that's the problem. So you have an overcut chamber, an insert that's soldered in place with a much higher pressure cartridge. Not a good combination.
Oh man. Yep.
All right, move on to Danny's Overrated. And I think this is going to be a controversial
Oh
one.
man. Yeah, this is gonna upset some people. So overrated Milsurp, and I'm gonna preface this with the fact that I still love it, even though I think it's overrated. I love it, but I think the most overrated Milsurp is the Lee Enfield or the SMLE in particular. I have a few pretty good reasons why I think it's overrated. I mean the one everybody knows about and everybody talks about. Obviously it's a rim cartridge, so you get feeding issues, rim jam occasionally, and I actually shoot my infields pretty often, and I do get malfunctions pretty often. And now I think bloke on the range, he was talking about how rim jam's not really an issue with military cartridges, but I fire actual World War II British 303 out of my Lee Enfields pretty commonly because I just happen to have a lot of the ammo, and I still get feeding issues, especially a jam with the last round coming out of the magazine. You can see it in a few of my videos actually of Lee Enfield's jamming. You can also see it in Forgotten Weapons. I made a video like of a compilation of like Lee Enfield's jamming. That's on my channel, but it's just jamming and rim jam it's very common with the Lee Enfields, and I think it's like almost underreported, like how prone to jamming the guns are if you're not really careful with them. A couple other things. The rear locking lugs. The Lee Enfield has rear locking lugs. Nobody really about it. Like nobody would put up with a gun, like a modern gun, having rear locking lugs. But it's to Lee Enfield fans, it's just absolutely fine having rear locking lugs, and all the problems that go along with that. It is prone to jamming from dust and debris. I think just the way the action is sort of very open, very slick action. It's a very smooth action, and I think sort of the openness and with that allows it to be very smooth and slick, makes it extra prone to jamming. And then the biggest thing that people always say about the Lee Enfield is the 10 round magazine is just it's amazing as a 10 round magazine. It's still loaded with 5 round clips. It's still loaded with 5 round clip. That 10 round magazine doesn't save you a lot of time when you're still loading it time. So you still have to take out, clip a 5, load it in there, load it into the gun, get out another one, load it in there. The Lee Enfield Charger clips are slower to load than other types of clip loading. They're it's slower than an in-block clip. It's slower than the Mauser style stripper clip. That's it. I think I've angered all the Enfield fans that are listening to this with that, but that's why I think it's overrated gun.
I do agree with you, Danny. I'm going to lump this together with something we've already talked about, so I want people to understand it's not as bad, but it's in a similar boat, the SMLE, as the M9130. It's an early design that should have been replaced, but because of logistic, cost, whatever, it stayed around.
Yeah, that's a fair point to make. A lot of people will probably come right back with like, oh, well, what about the number 4? And the number 4 wasn't necessarily like an improvement. It was just a simplification or like a way of making the SMLE cheaper. It
Well,
wasn't meant to be a huge improvement.
here's the part that people don't either realize, and I didn't realize until I started looking into it, or they don't want to talk about. The SMLE, I'm looking at it right now, the SMLE was adopted 1907 until the official adoption of the number 4 Mark I. And when was that, Danny? Do you know when that was?
Like 1940 or 41.
1941. We're talking in the middle of World War II, post the invasion of France. We are updating the rifle we used from 1907.
Yeah, you know why they did that?
No.
Because they British left Dunkirk. They basically left the majority of their rifles, of their SMLEs in France. And so when all the soldiers went back and everything, they needed to arm the new recruits. They had to make new ones. They were going to replace the SMLE. The British were going to replace it. Everybody knows about the in 1917 or the British P14.
Yeah, the pattern 14.
We're going to replace it with the pattern 13 rifle. The pattern 13 rifle was meant to replace the SMLE, and the pattern 13 rifle was basically a Mauser, chambered in like a Magnum cartridge round.
Yeah, going back to what we talked about, actually, they had a poor showing in the Second Boer War, and the British High Command went, okay, Boers were using Model 1895 Mausers, 7mm Mauser, flat shooting, long range cartridge. What can we do to fix this? And that was their idea, was they were going to make a whole new rifle, essentially copy a Mauser as much as they could, and make a Magnum cartridge out of it. And then World War I started, and
that flew right out the window.
yeah, it's insane to think, okay, we're going to entirely rearm our entire armed forces, a whole new cartridge, in the middle of a war. That's not going to happen. And then the war ended, and they're like, don't really need to do this.
And then you can't exactly say that the rifle that you gave your troops through the whole First World War, like you can't say that was a bad rifle. We need to replace it.
Yeah,
so, then
there's no money. No money around.
Yeah, and
it
did really. The Great War did really bankrupt the British Empire too. Yeah.
Andrew,
I think the SMLE, the Lee Enfield design, is very innovative. It's a very robust rifle. I have issues with mine. That is on me. I need to get some parts that are worn on it and replaced. My experience with my SMLE, mine has always performed well. Guess I never really thought of it as an overrated rifle. That's just my opinion, but there's some very good points being made here, and you guys are right on the money. It's a rifle that simply was not updated in the sense Mark One. It's the same basic rifle as the Lee Enfield SMLE, and even before that, the Longley.
Yeah, and the Longley was based on the American rifle, the 1885 Remington Lee rifle.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah,
pretty
I never really thought about
that. Pretty dated. Yeah.
I never really thought of the Lee Enfield as being an overrated rifle. I love mine, and that's very interesting. Never thought of it like that.
well, I didn't know until we started discussing this, Danny. I didn't realize that they had rear locking lugs.
Yeah. For some reason, that the thing that's kind of on the end of the Enfield bolt, it kind of looks like a lug, and that's I always kind of assumed it was, but it doesn't really act like a lug at all.
And so, to have people understand what we're talking about here, the majority of modern rifles have locking lugs at the front of the bolt, which are stronger and absorb the impact better, so you can have a more powerful cartridge, less materials required in the receiver to make it strong. The problem with the rear locking lug is twofold. You have to make the receiver extremely strong because it's going to need to absorb all of that impact further down into the receiver. And the second thing, and this is a safety feature actually of the Lee Enfield, I use air quotes there, it actually causes the bolt to flex. So if there's a problem and it's out of headspace or whatever, and it's starting to vent the gas backwards, the bolt will actually flex and vent the gas out the side. Safety feature. Potential issue though is that your headspace will just go to crap after so many rounds.
Yeah, there's a plethora of reasons why, like the rear locking lugs are definitely a thing of the past, and it's just interesting. Yeah, nobody thinks about it with the infield, and that it is like an inferior, locking system.
Will, any thoughts?
I'm probably somewhere more in the middle between all the opinions. I mean, I love the infields. I love the history, the collectability. I love the long leads. I love the original Lee Enfield carbines before you even get to the SMLEs, and a lot of rich history. But a lot of good points were talked about, especially with the action. I mean, the fit and finish of the guns themselves, I think they're the best handling Milsurp I've ever picked up. I mean, I absolutely love the stock profile of a SMLE. I love the thickness. I love the full length handguard. I love the nose cap, the bayonet lug. But then you get back to the action, and I don't prefer the cock on close. I just don't have the confidence in the infield action as I do compared to a Mauser.
I think I think the big thing for me, and this point that I was making, I just assumed at the start of World War II they had the number fours already. That wasn't the case. They were using the SMLE through the end of the war.
Yeah, but it goes so much farther past that. I mean, India continued to make the number one Mark III after World War II up until the 60s, until they switched over to the NATO version, the 2A and 2A1. I mean, they continued to make in India essentially the SMLE up until like 1988.
And this goes back to our discussion of the Mosin. And that's the part that I'll get on a soapbox and say, why does the SMLE get the pass? We know it's a better overall design than the Mosin. I'm not arguing that point. But it's definitely an outdated design by the start of World War II. But it gets a pass.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I look at the SMLE and the number four. I mean, I like the number four. I like the sights on the number four, but I like the SMLE more than the number four. But more than both of those, I like the old Lee Enfield carbines, the predecessors to the SMLEs, carbines for the long Lees and Royal Irish Constabulary carbines. And I'd take something like that all day long over the SMLE itself.
Does any of you got a pattern 14?
Yeah, that's a good tangent. I was meaning to talk about that. You know, when I own the Pattern 14, the US 17, and multiple Lee Enfields, and if I want to shoot 303 British, I don't shoot an SMLE or a number four. I take out my Pattern 14, and I think that's the biggest telltale that we can say.
Andrew?
I have shot a Pattern 14, a U.S. model of 1917. Great rifle.
You guys heard of any like rim jam or any issues like that with the Pattern 14 and 303?
No, I've never had a single issue.
I wonder
That's
if that
interesting. I never thought about it.
I wonder if that goes back to the fact, essentially you're loading the gun twice with them.
It's true.
You're doubling the chances of doing rim lock because you're having to load it twice.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is all the fancy the fancy way that you're supposed to load the Lee Enfield charger clips, which is like like alternating like one round on top and the other one below it. It's funny because I've actually seen it in official British training videos, and it's loaded different ways. Like it doesn't seem to be like sleeve followed like doctrine as far as like loading the bullets into the charger clip. So I don't know. I think there's probably a bigger thing with it, and use plenty of actual Milsurp 303 whenever I shoot the infield. So I can't really blame anything on like commercial ammo. Like I think Bloke on the Range attributes a lot of the shortcomings of the Lee Enfield to commercial 303 ammo. I will say shooting commercial 3.3 ammo through a Lee Enfield is a much pleasant experience. Extracting cartridges out of a Lee Enfield when you're shooting commercials way easier than when you're shooting much stouter Milsurp loaded 303, as smooth and as easy to work the bolt fast when you shoot Milsurp ammo as it is when you shoot commercial ammo.
So I had a number 4, Mark 1 Star actually, and I sold it. I had so many issues feeding that magazine. Anybody have magazine issues?
Yes, every number 4 I've ever owned has had, including the Long Branch that I now own. Every number 4 I've ever owned has had magazine feeding issues.
Andrew?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever shot my number 4. I can't really remember for number 1s.
Andrew?
I have not owned a number 4 Mark 1 yet. I do have consistent feeding issues with my number 1 Mark 3 Star.
That's another point that I forgot to mention. Seems to be an issue with magazines themselves. I've seen some stuff talking about them, and I've seen detail about it, but I don't really know for sure. I don't want to go into that because I don't know for sure. But it's a design problem with the magazine.
Yeah, and a lot of the infield guys, they go into like, how you're supposed to tweak the feed lips and like bend the little ears every, teeny bit this way and teeny bit that way. And then I feel like when you're getting into a military surplus rifle where you have to like magazine and tweak it ever so slightly just so that it works, I think when you're to that point, you just need to realize that you're probably dealing with an inferior design.
I think the key is just to go back before they had charger loading Lees. Go back to your long Lees and your Lee Enfield carbines. I think you might have a little different perspective for loading and feeding issues.
Yeah, I'd love to own a long Lee. I think those are really slick rifles.
Okay. So I think we've gone over everybody's opinions. I'm not going to do mine. I don't have time, unfortunately. We'll have to do this again some other time. I'm sure there's tons of ones that we can come up with that are overrated and underrated. But Danny, I would like to bring up that Danny has a YouTube channel, North Florida Gun Guy, and he's going to be putting these podcasts up on there. He's already put episode 1, and you said you had a comment, Danny?
Oh yeah, I had a comment on it. Let me pull it up real quick. So I had a comment on my YouTube channel by a Volkswagen gamer, and he says, I don't know if I agree with Arasaka's being good first Milsurp rifles. Ammo is pretty expensive at about $30 plus for 20 rounds. Those are not as expensive to shoot.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with him there on that. I mean, it is difficult when you own Arasakas and you're trying to turn them into shooters. I mean, it really just depends on what your intent is. A lot of stuff I have, I know there's no chance I'll ever be able to shoot it reasonably, and I'm okay with that. And I have other stuff I can shoot whenever I want. So I guess to respond to him, it's really about what your intent is. If you're trying to get something you can shoot whenever you want, you might want to go for something like a Mauser. But if you're looking for something just for the history or the collectability, there's nothing wrong with it.
Price of ammunition does not degrade the quality, fit, finish, accuracy, and overall capabilities of a rifle.
Yeah, that's true. My response to his comment was that 7.7 is actually not a very hard round to reload. Like it's not that commercially available, but it's a pretty easy cartridge to reload because the actual projectile is the same as the British 303 projectile. So you can use this. I bet you know this, Aaron. What is it? The .312 diameter cartridge.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, they're they if I remember, Andrew, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe they based the 7.7 Japanese on captured Enfield 303 ammunition.
Yes, I have heard that. Don't have the book with me to confirm it, but I think that is the story.
I know it's the same projectile, and I think the actual the case is like an 8mm Mauser case. It's not an extremely difficult round. I'm not sure about 6.5 Japanese. I don't know how hard that is to reload, but I don't think 7.7 is really that difficult.
Yeah, I got oddball cartridges like 8x60 Kropatschek black powder that I'm just like, man, there's no way I'm gonna ever find realistic ammunition for that. It's just part of the collecting. I mean, you're gonna get stuff that you can't very easily shoot, but 7.7 Jap you can still find. It's just you got to pay a little bit for it.
The metric designation for 303 British 7.7 by 56R Japanese made it 7.7 by 58 inches, not rimmed, and so they just changed it a little bit, but it's almost essentially a direct copy.
Oh, that's very interesting. It's like a rimless 303.
And it's also a little bit longer.
But you got to remember the original 7.7 Jap was rimmed for the heavy machine guns.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's an interesting thing I'm reading here. They actually just straight up copied 303 round. It's the exact same round. It's 7.7 by 56R. It's the exact same round.
Didn't they make a semi-rimmed version of the 7.7 too?
Yeah, you have
Yes.
the fully rimmed, semi-rimmed, and then the rimless.
And that's just the logistics of that must have been a nightmare for the Japanese.
Yep. Not just that, but you got also being 6.5 by 50 Japanese still being fielded during the Second World War. So you got two different calibers. You got three different versions of the same caliber on top of caliber still being fielded. Yeah, logistics was crazy, and that is the reason why shoot, a lot of people will go, to a gun show or to a flea market even, and they'll find crates of Japanese machine gun ammo on strips for the Type 92 heavy machine gun. And people say that, oh yeah, just strip that off there and you can shoot it out of your rifles. Do not. It's a different. It's physically different. It's a rimmed cartridge for the machine guns. It's rimless for the rifles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
lot
that's-
of obscure cartridges out there. I know because I have a lot of them. And I can say from experience that making your own ammunition, actually taking a different brass of a different caliber and making your own ammunition is a gigantic pain in the ass. And I understand why some of this stuff is so expensive now because I have done it myself. I've converted 4570 to 8 by 52R Siamese. In the future, I will just save up my money and buy pre-converted brass. I will never do that again. It was a gigantic hassle. I agree with Will, though. You get into collecting, you're going to find stuff that you're not going to be able to load for. It's just, unless you're willing to spend a lot of time and money and effort to make them workable. I have a Monlicker 1886 closet behind me. I doubt I'll ever see that fire. It's an 11 millimeter by 58R Verndl, and that's just a gigantic black powder cartridge. It's not going to happen.
Probably about 100 rounds of that stuff, like original 11 millimeter.
Yeah, I know you own it, Danny, but I don't really trust putting 120-year-old ammunition in a 132-year-old firearm.
What's the worst that could happen?
It blows up.
Yeah, I think that stuff I sold to Danny was dated 1889.
All right, guys. Does anybody have anything else they want to say? I would like to say that we do have a email address for the podcast. It's milsurpworld@gmail.com. That's MILSURP world@gmail.com. If you want to send suggestions, you tell me that I suck and I'm not really good at this. Whatever, I don't care.
Don't say things like that.
Well, we can just send me comments about how Danny doesn't know what a clip is and M1s are the best thing ever created.
For what I say, Arasaka still suck. I get it.
Yeah, whatever. Want to send me comments to that, and we'll put you on the air hopefully if we get some comments.
Let's go into the clipazine.
Yes, the clips go into the clipazine.
I'd just say, we talked about the Devitis rifle earlier. There's probably a lot of people who don't know anything about it. And I know Ian of Forgotten Weapons has a video about them. They can give you a good primer of the history of the weapon and see what they look like. And
yeah, I think that we all here subscribe to Ian on Forgotten Weapons and Othais on CN Arsenal, and we would all recommend going to checking out their videos if you're looking at buying something. Go watch this 20-30 minute video. Some of the videos are a little bit longer, but just go ahead and get the history behind it. Know what you're getting into. All right, and with that, I will say goodbye, and we'll be on next time, and hopefully we have some new topics. I'm not sure what we're going to do yet, but we'll have some fun doing it. Thank you all. Bye. 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 Thank you all.